What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the program. When talking about Diddy's legal troubles, I think it's important to go back and remember that all of this really started with the lawsuit that Diddy filed against Diageo of North America. And in that lawsuit, Diddy claimed that Diageo was being racist, all kinds of things about his dispute over Combs Wine and Diageo. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at that complaint. That way we have a full picture of the whole entire situation surrounding Diddy that led up to this. So, let's dive into the complaint for injunctive relief filed by Diddy against Diageo North America. Plaintiff, Combs Wines and Spirit, files this complaint against Diageo North America. The nature of the actions. In public, Diageo, a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded spirits company, proclaims itself a leader in diversity and inclusion. Diageo's public statements tout that it supposedly believes the most inclusive and diverse culture makes for a better business and a better world, and that diversity fuels growth and innovation and ensures we can authentically sell our brands to our consumers. Cloaking itself in the language of diversity and equality is good for Diageo's business, but it's a lie. While Diageo may conspicuously include images of its black partners in advertising materials and press releases, its words only provide the illusion of inclusion. As Combs Wines and Sean Combs have experienced firsthand, Diageo, by and through its parent company, Chief Executive Officer Ivan Menendez, he's proven unwilling to treat black people and partners equally, even when explicitly required by contract to do so. Sean Diddy Combs is the owner of Combs Wines and has a long-standing business relationship with Diageo for two spirit brands, Ciroc Vodka and De Leon Tequila. Based on Diageo's false promises about investing in diverse-owned and diverse black brands, Mr. Combs has put the full force of his marketing, business, and personal resources into his Diageo partnership. But because he knows that contracts matter more than press releases, Mr. Combs insisted that Diageo agree to certain terms to ensure his brands were not ignored or relegated to second-class status, but instead treated equally. Specifically, his agreement with Diageo contains redacted. Rather than equal treatment, Diageo has treated Mr. Combs and his brands worse than others because he is black. Diageo has typecast Ciroc and De Leon, apparently deciding they are black brands that should be targeted only to urban consumers. Diageo's president of Reserve and New Business, Stephen Rust, directly acknowledged the company's racist undertones in 2019, telling Mr. Combs that some within Diageo's leadership resented him for making too much money. He also admitted that Mr. Combs' race was part of the reason Diageo limited the neighborhoods where the Combs brands were distributed. If Mr. Combs were Martha Stewart, Mr. Rust said, things would be different. Diageo, Mr. Menendez, and Mr. Rust have put their feet on the neck of Mr. Combs' brands. In a business where production, distribution, and sales are the pillars of success, Ciroc and De Leon have been starved of resources for all three. While Diageo invested in and expanded its other brands, many of which were acquired after Ciroc and De Leon, Mr. Combs' brands were allowed to wither, getting increased attention only if Mr. Combs' wines demanded it under threat of legal action. In a proceeding not before this court, Mr. Combs intends to seek billions of dollars in damages due to Diageo's neglect and breaches. Diageo cannot even reasonably dispute that De Leon has been treated less favorably than brands like Casamigos or Don Julio. Instead, Diageo claims that it's required only to provide De Leon proportionally equal treatment. But it wasn't Diageo that kneecapped De Leon sales growth for nearly a decade, and now says that because De Leon has not yet reached the same sales level as competing brands Casamigos and Don Julio, Diageo need not provide it with the same scale of support. Diageo's self-fulfilling prophecy not only ignores Diageo's legal obligations, but also ignores the growth that Mr. Combs and Combs Wine have recently won for De Leon in the marketplace. Diageo will squander that hard-fought growth if it continues to treat De Leon like a mere proportional priority. Unfortunately, this is not the first time Diageo has had to answer for its unequal treatment of its black partners. Through the present lawsuit, Combs Wines seeks to finally put an end to Diageo's long-standing misconduct. Combs Wines demands nothing more than what Diageo has promised to consumers, shareholders, business partners, and Combs Wines itself. Diageo must be ordered by a court to give Combs Wines the same treatment it gives its other successful tequila brands. It's time that Diageo's actions matched its words. Introduction. Mr. Combs is a powerful force in both entertainment and business. Internationally renowned as a musician, music producer, entrepreneur, actor, film and television producer, and philanthropist. Mr. Combs has established a vast following among his fans and the general population. Mr. Combs has used his acclaim to grow his business and those of his partners in a wide variety of industries, including media, health and wellness, fragrances, and fashion. Diageo first approached Mr. Combs more than 15 years ago. In 2007, Diageo contacted Mr. Combs to help grow its then struggling vodka brand Ciroc. Mr. Combs agreed to use his widely known name and influence to help promote and market Ciroc. To show the commitment to Diageo and Ciroc, Mr. Combs agreed to, redacted, but in return, Diageo promised, redacted. The years following the signing of the Ciroc agreement were filled with consistent supply issues and a lack of meaningful distribution. Despite Mr. Combs' repeated pleas, Diageo failed time and time again to devote the proper attention, resources, and support to Ciroc. But even in the shadow of Diageo's neglect, Mr. Combs sparked spectacular growth for the once fledgling brand. Mr. Combs' impact is proven by the numbers. In 2007, Ciroc sold only about 75,000 cases per year. In just 2 years after Mr. Combs began promoting Ciroc, annual sales grew to about 400,000 cases. And by 2014, sales of Ciroc had grown by over 3,000% since Mr. Combs began marketing it to approximately 2.6 million cases sold per year. Due to the power, reach, and efforts of Mr. Combs, Ciroc went from just another vodka to a billion-dollar spirit brand known by millions. In 2013, Combs Wine and Diageo formed De Leon Holdco LLC, a joint venture to buy, market, and sell De Leon tequila, a boutique tequila, brand then distributed in just 18 states and Washington, D.C. Despite Mr. Combs' efforts and optimism and Diageo's promises, the parties' marriage suffered almost immediately due to Diageo's neglect. The parties had formal and informal agreements about distribution, investment, and brand positioning for De Leon tequila. Yet Diageo consistently fell short of its commitments. It instead began investing more heavily in other brands, including the competing Don Julio tequila that it acquired in 2015 and Casamigos tequila that it acquired in 2017. Enamored with its new shiny toys, Diageo's commitment to and focus on De Leon inevitably suffered. Left alone to save De Leon, while Diageo invested more than $1 billion to acquire competing brands, Mr. Combs redacted. But Diageo again left Mr. Combs out to dry. Diageo insisted on an inferior design, using inferior materials, and even worse, launched those redesigned bottles without any marketing support. The public was understandably confused, and the product continued to flail. Diageo's refusal to abide by its obligations and promises escalated in the late 2010s to the detriment of De Leon tequila. For example, Diageo discontinued De Leon's 375mm SKUs, the popular half-bottle option offered by nearly all major spirit brands. Redacted, creating sharp sales declines in key markets. Redacted. In 2020, Diageo's unfair treatment of De Leon reached new heights. Amidst a growing shortage of agave, the key ingredient in tequila, Diageo brazenly snubbed De Leon by redacted. The result of this systemized neglect, widespread and years-long shortages of out-of-stocks of De Leon tequila in major markets, including California, Texas, and Florida. Adding insult to injury, Mr. Combs learned of these varied inventory issues from retailers, not from Diageo, and Diageo's failure to provide even this basic courtesy confirmed the worst. This was not a good faith partnership, let alone the trusting marriage Mr. Combs had hoped for. While Diageo has undoubtedly violated its contractual obligations and unfairly lined its own pockets, this case is not an ordinary contract dispute in which a party chooses to disregard its contractual promises due to its greed and profit. Rather, and similar to the realities experienced by many people of color in the United States, Diageo's treatment of its business relationship with Mr. Combs was tainted by racial prejudices. For example, after Mr. Combs grew Ciroc into a billion-dollar brand that had widespread appeal, redacted, Diageo's unequal treatment of Mr. Combs is at times even less subtle. Mr. Rust, for example, told Mr. Combs that things would be different if you were white, not black, celebrity. Diageo, in other words, openly admitted that it viewed Mr. Combs merely as a black man that might prove useful in marketing to black consumers, nothing more. Predictably, De Leon and Mr. Combs bore the brunt of Diageo's conduct. It soon became clear that Diageo had stopped even going through the motions that are expected in any good faith partnership. Multiple retailers, each responsible for millions in spirit sales, have reported that despite their interest in carrying De Leon tequila and/or Ciroc. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the program. In this episode, we're getting right back to that lawsuit filed by Diddy against Diageo. In 2020, Mr. Combs confronted Diageo and demanded that Diageo commit to change its ways. Redacted, at least on paper, Diageo agreed. But Diageo's paper promises turned out to be little more than a way to make Mr. Combs sit down and shut up. Despite committing to be transparent about the production and sale of De Leon tequila, Diageo deceived Mr. Combs when he asked about such issues. For example, in 2021, Diageo told Combs Wines that its glass supplier had unexpected disruptions due to COVID and therefore would not produce as many bottles of De Leon tequila as expected. But when Combs Wines spoke with representatives of the supplier, they said that the shortages were due to planned maintenance that occurs every 7 years, maintenance that Diageo surely knew about but never told Combs Wines. The breach of promises and disrespect still had not ceased. This time, with understandably little trust in the Diageo team, Mr. Combs took action immediately. Redacted, Diageo's retort to these follow-up inquiries spoke volumes about its backwards treatment of Mr. Combs. While refusing to honor its own promises, Diageo demanded that redacted. In short, Diageo didn't care about respecting its obligations to Combs Wines. All it cared about was avoiding public accountability for its own discriminatory conduct. In November 2021, Combs Wines agreed to try diplomacy one more time to make the partnership work. Redacted. Combs entered into this agreement based on what turned out to be false promises. That Diageo would correct its course, commit to meaningfully support the De Leon brand, and finally live up to its diversity promises. But as explained below, those promises have not been kept and appear to have never been sincerely made. Redacted, redacted. But whatever Diageo's intentions were, its actions violate both the spirit and letter of the parties' agreement. Redacted. Yet again, Diageo's seemingly strong commitment turned out to be a paper lion. Despite a booming tequila market and redacted, Diageo has continued to produce underwhelming and disproportionately low quantities of De Leon tequila. Most recently, Diageo has crippled De Leon's growth by failing to keep up with consumer demand for De Leon's Reposado tequila. A Reposado tequila's surge in popularity, Diageo did not adequately ramp up De Leon production, causing De Leon Reposado to be consistently out of stock and forcing interested De Leon consumers to look elsewhere. Adding salt to the wound, the Combs team had for years foreseen this trend and had pushed Reposado as the would-be or should-be hero of the De Leon portfolio. Had Diageo not discarded the Combs team's guidance back then, the De Leon brand would never have been caught flat-footed in 2022 and 2023. Even the bare minimum, equal positioning efforts have proven too much for Diageo. Unlike other tequilas, De Leon doesn't even have a dedicated brand page on Diageo's website. This unequal treatment extends to sales and distribution. The lack of attention has become clear in the marketplace. Multiple distributors have told Combs Wines that Diageo has not spoken to them about De Leon or Ciroc. Other distributors lack even the basic information about the brands needed to decide whether to carry the brands, the sort of information that any good faith distribution effort would ensure was widely circulated. Numerous market participants, both inside Diageo and independent of it, have correctly diagnosed this problem as one of racial stereotyping. As Ciroc brand executive, for instance, redacted. Major retailers and potential business partners have likewise confirmed to Mr. Combs that Ciroc and De Leon are positioned by Diageo as ethnic brands. The predictable result of Diageo intentionally restricting De Leon's sales footprint is that De Leon's sales footprint has remained restricted. Third-party data confirms that De Leon distribution has hovered at minuscule levels, while Casamigos and Don Julio distribution rates continue to increase year after year. And even in retail locations that sell De Leon, its products are only in a few facings. Compare that to Don Julio and Casamigos, who not only have many multiples more retail facings than De Leon, but also have increased those retail facings almost every year. Likewise, while Don Julio and Casamigos have more than doubled their sales velocity in recent years, De Leon laggers behind. As of 2022, De Leon tequila has distributed in just 3.3% of all possible outlets, as compared to 36% for Don Julio and 34.4% for Casamigos. A disparity that is all the more egregious given that the parties' De Leon partnership predates Diageo's acquisition of these other brands. Under the joint venture agreement, these types of violations cause redacted. Combs Wines is now left with no option but to seek injunctive relief from this court to enforce redacted. The growth of the De Leon tequila brand has suffered significant headwinds and damage due to Diageo's intentional and willful conduct. At this point, only a binding enforceable court order will finally put Diageo on the path to compliance and force Diageo to end its deceptive, discriminatory, and damaging behavior. Parties, jurisdiction, and venue. Plaintiff Combs Wines and Spirits, LLC, is a New York limited liability company headquartered at 9200 Sunset Boulevard, West Hollywood, California. Combs Wines is wholly owned by Mr. Combs. Defendant Diageo North America is a Connecticut corporation headquartered at 3 World Trade Center, New York, New York. De Leon Holdco, LLC, is a Delaware limited liability company. Combs Wines and Diageo are members of the De Leon Holdco. New York has personal jurisdiction over Diageo because it's headquartered in New York. Venues proper under Section 503 of the Civil Practice Law and Rules in the county in which one of the parties resided when it was commenced. Diageo is headquartered in the county of New York. Combs Wines is also a New York limited liability company with its registration in the county of New York. Redacted. This is a court of competent jurisdiction. Assignment to the commercial division is proper because Combs Wines seeks equitable relief, and this action principally involves Diageo's breach of contract. The background. 1. Diageo recruits Mr. Combs to save its fledgling Ciroc vodka brand. Diageo plc is a British multinational multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company that owns leading alcohol and spirits brands. Diageo is a New York-based subsidiary of Diageo plc. In 2007, Diageo had a diversity problem. It had no prominent black partners. One of Diageo's vodka brands in 2007 was branded Ciroc. Ciroc was a struggling brand at the time, selling a meager 75,000 cases per year. Diageo was understandably desperate to get a known spokesperson to promote and sell Ciroc. In 2007, Diageo reached out to Mr. Combs, and at that time, Mr. Combs was already a Grammy Award-winning rapper, actor, record producer, and executive. As an entrepreneur, he had already launched numerous successful businesses and brands, including Bad Boy Records and the Sean John clothing line. Mr. Combs was also Menswear Designer of the Year in 2004 and will go on to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Black Entertainment Television Awards. Diageo approached Mr. Combs hoping that a popular black celebrity would both boost sales and help address a troubling diversity problem within the company. Mr. Combs then identified Ciroc as a product that he could help grow. Diageo promised Mr. Combs that if the Ciroc ambassadorship was successful, redacted. In the first several years of Mr. Combs' ambassadorship for Ciroc, Diageo consistently ran out of the popular Ciroc flavors and under-delivered distribution. In 2008, Ciroc Blue Dot ran out. In 2010, Ciroc Coconut ran out. In 2011, both Ciroc Coconut and Red Berry were out of stock in numerous key markets, including New York City, Washington, D.C., New Jersey, Delaware, Georgia, Maryland, Nevada, and California. Despite Diageo's oversights, the brand began to grow based on Mr. Combs' substantial efforts, and by 2014, Ciroc was a powerhouse in the alcohol business, with annual sales as high as 2.6 million cases. Indeed, public data shows how Mr. Combs used his worldwide reach to help Ciroc grow its global sales volume by many multiples. 2. Diageo and Combs Wine enter into an agreement to sell De Leon tequila, but Diageo begins investing in competing brands to the detriment of De Leon. Due to the success of Ciroc on September 9, 2013, Combs Wines and Diageo formed De Leon Holdco to purchase boutique tequila brand De Leon. Diageo promised to be passionate about this joint venture and agreed that it would invest to grow the brand, even promoting the acquisition in a Forbes interview. Unfortunately, Diageo was only interested in the PR benefits of partnering with a black businessman. From the very beginning of the partnership, Diageo's actions showed a clear intent to sideline and stereotype the De Leon brand, resulting in ineffective brand management. Combs Wines repeatedly lacked any meaningful say in critical aspects of De Leon's pricing, finance, and supply. These failures resulted in De Leon failing to meet expectations, and Combs Wines was consequently constrained in its ability to grow the business on its own. Diageo's disinterest in developing De Leon into a sustainable long-term partnership became transparent when it began acquiring tequila brands that competed directly with De Leon. For example, in 2014, only a year after entering into De Leon joint venture, Diageo agreed to acquire the competing tequila brand, Don Julio, and then committed to spending $400 million to grow it. In 2017, Diageo spent a whopping $1 billion to acquire another competing tequila brand, Casamigos. Following the acquisition of these competing brands, Diageo effectively abandoned De Leon. Diageo instead focused its marketing positioning efforts on brands like Casamigos, with its founders George Clooney, Randy Gerber, and Mike Meldman, Aviation Gin with its owner Ryan Reynolds, and Kettle One with the Nolet family, as it preferred choices for the broader market. Alright folks, we're going to wrap up right there, and in the next episode dealing with the topic, we're going to pick up with part 3. All of the information that goes with this episode can be found in the description box. Diageo and Diddy lawsuit. Part 3. After Redacted, Diageo also discontinued the production of the popular 375 milliliter bottles, causing a sharp decline of De Leon sales in key markets. Diageo's neglect of De Leon also resulted in the sort of careless mistakes and unfounded errors that comparable Diageo brands were not subjected to. Redacted. This resulted in serious supply issues as distributors in California, Texas, Florida, Washington, D.C., and other markets suffered from extended shortages of De Leon product. Some distributors were out of stock for months. To make things worse, Diageo failed to notify Combs Wines about these shortages. When Mr. Combs tried to implement strategies to mitigate the impacts of Diageo's mistreatment, he was ignored. Redacted. Both Diageo's design and rollout of the new bottle were disastrous. For starters, Diageo launched the new bottles into the market without any marketing support, resulting in confusion within the marketplace. Equally damaging was the defect in Diageo's slapdash design. The sticker on the new bottle was prone to bubbling, making the product look cheap. Given these blunders, the rebranded De Leon product, unsurprisingly, did not take off. De Leon's poor sales were all but guaranteed by Diageo's failure to keep De Leon on shelves. Throughout 2019, De Leon suffered material out of stocks nationwide, causing major damage to the brand and costing De Leon millions of dollars. Redacted. Put simply, Diageo actively harmed and continues to harm De Leon by investing in competing brands and recklessly managing De Leon's marketing, distribution, and sales strategies. Brand awareness continues to struggle, harming De Leon's sales, which are fully dependent on Diageo's support to position the brand and efforts to increase distribution. 4. Diageo's neglect is influenced by its regrettable racial animus. Throughout his partnership with Diageo, Mr. Combs emphasized his commitment to increasing diversity and helping Black entrepreneurs. He repeatedly discussed issues facing the Black community with Diageo leadership, imploring them to do more. While Diageo took steps to muster favorable PR, Diageo's treatment of Mr. Combs behind closed doors demonstrated its glaring hypocrisy. For instance, on June 12, 2020, Diageo announced a $20 million community fund to support social justice and help Black communities and businesses recover from the pandemic. Ivan Menezes, Diageo's PLC CEO, declared that Diageo has no tolerance for racism, injustice, or unequal treatment, and that Diageo is committed to taking every step necessary to champion equality everywhere. Despite these lofty public pronouncements, Diageo refused to address its discriminatory treatment of Mr. Combs. Mr. Combs stressed that De Leon and Ciroc need to be marketed to the public at large, not just as Black brands or brands that do well in certain accounts or zip codes. Despite Mr. Combs' advocacy, redacted, and even when Mr. Combs identified specific examples of matters that were racially insensitive, Diageo ignored them and worse, repeated the same racially charged action. For example, in advance of the launch of Ciroc's watermelon flavor, Mr. Combs and his team explained that Diageo needed redacted. Steve Russ, president of Reserve and new business at Diageo, eventually revealed Diageo's true attitude towards Mr. Combs and the Black community. At a meeting on or about October 10, 2009, Mr. Russ told Mr. Combs that some within the company's leadership resented him for making too much money and admitted that his race was probably part of the reason Diageo redacted. Mr. Russ told Mr. Combs that if he were Martha Stewart, his brands would be more widespread. Unfortunately, other Black business people besides Mr. Combs have felt the ill effects of Diageo's racial typecasting. Groundbreaking Black artist Pharrell Williams alleged in a lawsuit filed in 2013 that despite entering a 3-year contract to produce and distribute his alcoholic beverage, Q-Dream, Diageo shut down the partnership in breach of the parties' agreement after just 2 years. Even more recently, Ebony Major, the first Black blender at a major whiskey distillery, filed suit against Diageo for discrimination. After she created a bourbon called Blender Select, Diageo sent Miss Major on a publicity tour to promote it. Yet Miss Major left just a few months later, alleging persistent racial hostility, including pay discrepancies and demeaning treatment by coworkers. For example, Diageo sent her on a podcast with a host who was known to be hostile, who asked her what would happen if she got pulled over by the cops. One colleague allegedly asked her, "Hey, poofy head, what happened to the dreads?" Another told her that black should get over statutes. Miss Major's experience paralleled Mr. Combs' unfortunate experience with Diageo. Accordingly, on April 25, 2022, Mr. Combs expressed his frustration about Diageo's discriminatory conduct to Diageo North American then President Deborah Crew via email. Redacted. 5. Mr. Combs tries again to diplomatically resolve business issues. Mr. Combs has given Diageo every opportunity to correct its conduct. Among other things, Mr. Combs sent Diageo a timeline of their key failures, including those described above, along with proposed paths forward. Mr. Combs also repeatedly raised with Diageo executives his significant concerns about Redacted. None of these efforts worked. On May 20th, 2020, Mr. Combs reached his breaking point and contacted Mr. Menezes about the issues he had faced throughout the partnership. He stressed, "I will not continue to be treated this way, and if Diageo is truly committed to diversity, you can never treat another person of color this way again." He stated the joint venture had failed due to Diageo's mismanagement and neglect, including Redacted. Mr. Combs also explained that De Leon continues to be sabotaged by Diageo management and neglect. Mr. Combs made clear that De Leon was not priority for Diageo. He was not treated as a partner the way he was promised. Don Julio and Casamigos were prioritized over De Leon, and Diageo repeatedly made unilateral decisions that materially damaged the brand. In response, Mr. Menezes claimed to be committed to resetting the relationship and thanked Mr. Combs for being the key driver of success of Ciroc by being a champion of the African American people. Redacted. 6. Diageo again breaks its promises to Combs Wines. In February of 2021, Mr. Combs' team revealed to visit the Morales distillery and the location of Diageo's agave plants. It was there that they learned that despite redacted agave plants in the ground, none were allocated for De Leon. Redacted. Diageo had clearly failed to take any steps to improve De Leon's long-term profitability, despite Mr. Menezes' promises. Combs Wines also discovered that a De Leon glass supplier was experiencing disruptions in supply due to planned maintenance. Diageo told the Combs team that the disruption was an unforeseen impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Representatives of the supplier put the lie to Diageo's excuse, stating that Diageo certainly would have received notice of this regularly scheduled maintenance. After these years of broken promises, Mr. Combs decided to take action. On March 3rd, 2021, Combs Wines, through his attorneys, sent a letter, redacted. Additionally, on March 11th, 2021, a representative for Mr. Combs sent an email to Ms. Crew about the trip to Mexico, stating, "Based on this and other disturbing facts, redacted, it's become clear that Diageo teams treat De Leon as a batch brand." Redacted. He stressed that the joint venture agreement had been amended to remedy these kinds of problems. 7. Combs Wines tries one last time to resolve the parties' disagreements. On November 3rd, 2021, Combs Wines tried one last time to resolve the parties' issues as a result. Redacted. Given Diageo's track record, Combs Wines insisted that, redacted. 8. Despite its promises, Diageo's vastly inferior treatment of De Leon continues. Diageo's latest promises have also fallen flat. Diageo did nothing to change the unequal position, production, or distribution of De Leon. Therefore, despite Combs & Wines and Mr. Combs' marketing efforts, consumers cannot find De Leon in many stores, making it more likely consumers will buy Diageo over or other tequila brands, like Casamigos and Don Julio, that Diageo does widely distribute and sell. Throughout 2022 and 2023, Mr. Combs has repeatedly urged Diageo leadership to take action to repair damage already caused, prevent further damage to the De Leon brand, and to fix Diageo's corporate culture and lack of diversity. In September of 2022, for example, Mr. Combs emailed Ms. Crew after learning redacted. He stressed various issues, including redacted. This year, January, Mr. Combs emailed Mr. Menezes, concerned about Ciroc, redacted due to Diageo's lapses in focus and intensity. He recommended the parties establish redacted. Menzies responded that redacted. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the program. In this episode, we're going to get back to the Diageo and Diddy lawsuit. Over approximately 4 years ago, Diageo grew Casamigos sales from about 100,000 cases to 2.2 million cases in 2021. Over approximately 6 years, Diageo grew Don Julio from about 500,000 cases to 2.7 million cases in 2021. Although Diageo acquired De Leon years before both Casamigos and Don Julio, Diageo currently plans that De Leon redacted. Not surprisingly, Diageo's financial statements tout the growth of Casamigos and Don Julio with deafening silence about De Leon's performance. Sales of De Leon have floundered in part because of its sparse distribution and relegation to urban communities. As of last year, De Leon was distributed in approximately 3.3% of all outlets as compared to 34.4%, 36%, and 14.4% for Diageo-owned Casamigos, Don Julio, and 21 Seeds, respectively. Third-party data indicates that De Leon's overall distribution percentage, calculated by dividing the volume in individual stores where the production is available by the total volume for all stores in the market, remains at roughly 1% through today. Meanwhile, Don Julio's has grown 9% in 2017 to 18% currently. Likewise, Casamigos has grown from 4% to 2017 to 15% today. The story unfortunately stays consistent with the average number of facings in stores. De Leon's facings have remained about the same for the past 7 years, while Don Julio's average facings have grown by 108%, and Casamigos' average facings have grown by 111%. Indeed, even a basic Google search reveals what is apparent to anyone familiar with the placement of Diageo's tequila brands in the marketplace. Casamigos can be found in affluent neighborhoods like the west side of Los Angeles or Chicago's Gold Coast, while De Leon, when it can be found at all, is assigned to what Diageo likely believes are less desirable locations. This was not due to the lack of demand in the market. In fact, multiple major retailers were forced to contact Combs Wines about its brands in 2022. Instead of fulfilling its duties, Diageo appears to have never engaged or even contacted these brands for potential sale and distribution of those brands. Senior salespeople at Diageo have admitted, redacted, and Diageo employees have acknowledged that, redacted. This operational neglect has cost De Leon and Mr. Combs substantial loss of sales and profits. Even when Combs Wines successfully jumped through the extra hoops thrown up by Diageo, Diageo still refused to treat De Leon fairly. Diageo, for example, subjected De Leon to a test in certain key markets before it would improve De Leon's distribution. The Combs team worked doggedly to ensure that De Leon surpassed the targets and passed Diageo's test. But even that was not enough. Despite De Leon's strong results, there was no material change in the brand's distribution. As for the brand's marketing, far from treating De Leon equally, Diageo has been effectively hiding it. While Diageo highlights its other tequila products in its own marketing, it barely mentions De Leon. For example, Don Julio and Casamigos receive prime real estate on Diageo's webpage, entitled Our Brands. De Leon is nowhere to be found. Diageo's online brand portfolio also prominently features photos of Don Julio and Casamigos, describing Don Julio as the world's first luxury tequila, and Casamigos as a small batch ultra-premium tequila made from the finest hand-selected 100% blue Weber agaves. De Leon Tequila's brand page, however, is conspicuously missing from the same webpage. Indeed, as early as 2023, De Leon received only about 2% of the number of references Don Julio and Casamigos received on Diageo's website. All paltry 37 references compared to 1,700 or more for both Casamigos and Don Julio. Press releases discussing Diageo's tequila portfolio fail to even mention De Leon. Consistent with Diageo's near-total erasure of De Leon, these press articles describe Diageo only as the producer of Don Julio and Casamigos tequila. These stark differences are not and cannot be accidental. Based on its misguided belief that De Leon can only appear to the so-called urban population, Diageo continues to unequally market De Leon predominantly to black consumers. And Diageo relies on its own neglect of De Leon to perpetrate further neglect of De Leon under the guise of redacted. As experienced firsthand by Plaintiff Combs Wine's Diageo's, reality is vastly different from Diageo's rhetoric. Enough is enough. Diageo must be ordered to provide the equal treatment that it has contractually promised. Cause of action: injunctive relief to enforce Article 9 of the Third JV Agreement. Combs Wines realleges and incorporates all allegations in this complaint as if set forth fully herein. To obtain a permanent injunction under Delaware law, a plaintiff needs to show 1. Success on the merits, 2. Irreparable harm, if injunctive relief is not granted,